Howdy everyone out there in Twitch land. Welcome back to HexHunter. We are doing the General State today, and oh my god, it's a cat!
Today, Function is not here. He is going to be replaced by Clarissa. She is not wanting to sit still right now.
Hope little Miss Clarissa's not in charge here. But I am Mokog, I'm here with my buddy Function, and we are back with the...
General Stand, hooray!
Hey!
We got some fun stuff this week.
Fun stuff, not just fun stuff. We got some really cool stuff going on this time. The new patch drop.
Yeah, so that's pretty exciting.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, they've changed up quite a bit. I mean, look at this smexy texture. The rock looks like rock. And shiny goes all get shiny.
I mean, there's all kinds of new stuff with the patch, and we got a lot to talk about on that front. I mean, before we get into that too much, but I'm also really impressed with how quickly they're fixing the things that didn't go as planned. I mean, with a patch like this, I'm sure there were a lot of stuff that didn't go as planned, but they've been putting in a lot of work. That's pretty awesome.
Well, you know, one of the things I work with is, in my line of work, we deal with a lot of very complex software. It's not necessarily as graphically demanding as a lot of video games are, but a lot of what makes different types of systems and especially different types of programs really complex isn't necessarily the graphics and what gets put out on them. It's actually its connection to multiple types of systems and its impact on individual groups.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Hex, because of how it tries to interconnect and how it relates all the different spheres of the program together, is a fairly complex program. And then there's everything that runs under the hood of the program that's also complex. Yeah. So whenever
there's all kinds of stuff.
So whenever you're building something like that and you're having to update it, just taking it from a live server or taking it from your beta server to your live server is an ordeal and is handled by geniuses. So, you know, the forums love to give all the guys a lot of flack for for the timing and that everything wasn't perfect when it comes out. It's very rarely perfect.
I think this patch has been very well received. At least from what I've seen on the forums and on Twitter, people seem pretty ecstatic. I think everybody's pretty understanding that there's still some bugs and stuff going through, but that everybody's just excited to be seeing forward momentum again. I think that's the best way to put it.
Oh, true. Definitely forward momentum. And you know what I've so rarely noticed, and it's not really until like this patch it brings it back up again? Gozog has only half a horn on one side.
He only has half a horn?
Yeah, so you see where the helmet is? You got one horn that goes all the way up, that's a ram's horn. Other side, broken.
Oh yeah, I think I noticed that. But
you might see it like every once in a while, but like whenever they're doing like the headshots and stuff, you see it cuts off kind of like around where one of the edges of the horns is, and so you just kind of assume the helmet goes all the way around. No.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll be getting those tournaments in pretty soon. I'm definitely anxiously waiting for them. Hacky was mentioning that. Oh, but before we move on too much further with the show, why don't we do a brief outline of what we're going to be talking about today, and then we can start diving into talking about it.
So our biggest and most awesome thing that's dropped, I would say, so far has been the patch. But they implemented a couple really interesting, not in the patch notes, kind of hidden gems in there. And they've added gold to starter trials.
Yeah.
And that's got an effect that we'll definitely want to talk about.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested to hear what you have to say about that. I mean, with the addition of gold to just proving grounds, it definitely had an impact. And we will save that for shortly. But I'm interested to hear.
And you unleashed a heck of a brainstorm this week too, right?
Oh yeah, I did. So I mean, I've kind of been building up to this one for a while and just trying to figure out how we want to do it. We're kind of doing an episodic brainstorm where they're going to tie in together over the next couple of weeks, and we're going to attempt to design a dungeon, not all the way through, not like coming up with every single card or every encounter or anything like that, but we're going to try to come up with a theme and a setting and maybe one or two encounters and a couple mechanics and stuff like that, and see what we can we can come up with as a community, and it should be a lot of fun. I haven't posted my submission yet. Whenever I do these brainstorms, I always start off with a submission of my own, and I haven't posted one yet because I want to come up with something really good. And I have a couple ideas, but they haven't quite hit the right nerve for me yet. So sooner or later, I'll probably update that post and put one of my own. But there've been a couple good ones already. There was like a coyote. Well, we're doing the outline.
Yeah.
And we'll get into the brainstorm later.
So then, after we're done with the brainstorm, we're going to do something that I've wanted to do for a while, but we haven't had the real ability to. I want to give away packs. I didn't want to give away the promise of packs before. I wanted to give away actual packs, and we can do it now.
Yeah.
And it's going to be awesome.
That'll be good.
And then we'll also be cracking a pack and a top pick, right?
Yeah, so I think that's a synopsis of what we're going to be talking about today. We might come up with another thing or two as we're going through it. But why don't we just dive right in and talk about the patch? Are there any particular things in here that you want to talk about or that you're really excited about besides the starter trial stuff? Because that will be its own little topic.
You know, the graphical update that's just been done across the board is, in my honest opinion, is fantastic graphically. I think the execution has been a little bit of a slow rollout, and I've seen a lot of rumblings, especially down here in chat, that's been a little bit more like a Baron's chat recently. But from what I've been seeing, after they've started hotfixing and patching unexpected foibles that have occurred, I've seen a lot of increases in speed. I've seen a lot more stability. There was an initial issue where you might have not necessarily had all of your cards showing up in your inventory and in your card manager. Luckily, that appears to be getting fixed as your machine updates to the server and the server starts updating to your machine.
Yeah, I had a couple cards missing from our budget accounts, and actually that was something we didn't have on the outline. We have to talk about budget a little bit.
Oh my goodness, that's scary on your budget account though, because you know what's there on your budget account for the most part, because it's such a smaller card pool. You're like, oh my god, I am supposed to have this card in here, and this is the one thing the deck needs right now, or I need to sell this. I can't sell this right now. Where on earth is it?
Yeah.
So I was having, I had those freak out moments, but patience is the better part of virtue in that case.
So I think another thing that's really exciting about the patch, and it's pretty small, and it's something a lot of people have been waiting for quite a while, myself included, is that we're getting like a turn skipping button, or whatever you might want to call it. It passes the turn. You can either proceed to the attack phase or proceed to the end phase of a turn, and having those hotkeys is pretty nice. And I definitely expect myself to accidentally press them when I didn't mean to pass the turn and lose a game because of it. And I should probably keep count of how often that happens, because that's definitely a function type of mistake.
Well, it's better than just spamming the spacebar, but like...
Yeah, my spacebar is definitely pretty loud. My stream will let me know about that one for sure.
So, I mean...
So having that's pretty nice. I haven't played a whole lot yet because I've been waiting for tournaments, so I haven't really had all that much hands-on time with actual client as far as gameplay goes. But a lot of the stuff we're seeing now is very similar to what we were seeing at Gen Con. It's still going to take me a little bit of time to get over the resource pool button or tracker being over on the right side. I do kind of like it there. It's just, I think anybody who's complaining about it now, myself included, I think the main thing is that people are so used to having it in one spot that when it changes to a different spot on the screen, it just doesn't feel natural. But if they had been used to it this way all along, I think that would be different. Another reason is that, I don't know, it feels like it frees up the screen a little bit, that it makes it feel a little bit more even. But I'm still not sure if I actually like it there or if I like it back over by the champion. Having your life total and your resource pool right next to each other seems kind of important. So we'll see how that stays. Although it would be nice to have a setting to start being able to move stuff around on your screen, kind of like modded UI stuff. But that's probably a long shot.
I think modded UIs are still a little ways off. But I think that would be a really great thing to actually add to the game. And we're pulling up a game here so that we can take a look at the in-game UI. This has actually been patched and hotfixed along the way. especially since yesterday, because I started trying to play games since yesterday, checking out the starter trial, seeing what you can get, and there's a couple things that have been changed depending on what your resolution settings are. So one of the big things I've noticed is that when I first started with the patch before they started hotfixing is that the hand size was huge. It was taking up like almost the entire space between the portrait for your champion and where your deck was. They've reduced that size down. They've adjusted a little bit where the main face button was since they've hotfixed that in. Little small graphical things that I think are just like little adjustment and resolution adjustments that honestly they make a really big difference.
I feel like the hands though, they still need to move it up a little bit, like
yes, in
maybe
its
a centimeter or
so,
so,
up a little bit.
because it like the bottom of the screen clips a lot of the text box of the cards, especially if they're on the right or left side of your hand. And although they're a little bit more legible, you can almost read them without enlarging them right now. Them just being clipped by the bottom part of the screen seems a little odd to me.
Yeah, I think I could give up a little bit of the real estate that's used up towards the top to show off the sleeves of your opponent. I wouldn't necessarily mind giving up some of that real estate and moving the board up a smidge so that you can get the view of the cards a little bit more. I would be okay with that, most definitely. I am not enjoying the resource pool being on the right-hand side, though.
Yeah.
And I don't mind the threshold being over here. And I know you want your threshold and you want your resources generally to be on the same side because you want that understanding across. I think it might be a really good future investment to do lefty and righty so that you can just flip it.
Yeah, I would definitely like the option that for players to just put it wherever they would like for the two of those. And it feels... The other thing that I think is kind of weird on the opponent's resource and threshold, it has them like right next to each other, on top of each other. And then on your own, they're kind of separated. I think, at least on a clarity level for newer players and just for everybody, I'd like to see both players have it the same way that it has it for your opponent. I know it looks aesthetically nice the way it's laid out right now, but aesthetics aren't everything. Sometimes clarity is a lot more important. I think this is one of those times. And while we're talking about aesthetics, I can't remember if this was even a thing before. I want to say it was, but I can't remember. I don't want to see my opponent's hand. The cards...
It was not a thing before. This is new.
Yeah. Them being on the screen, I get that it gets to show off the sleeves and stuff, but I feel like it doesn't serve any purpose to actually have it there. You still get to see the sleeves of the deck, and if they had an option to turn off opponent's hand, I would probably turn it off all the time. I think it's just like one unnecessary thing to be on the screen. And I hate to say this, but it kind of makes me feel like they're trying to make it feel a little bit more Hearthstone-y for like crossover players, maybe to attract some people and have familiar things for them. But for me, having the cards there, I just don't see why it's necessary.
Well, you know, if they're going to have the cards there, then I would... So you see how at the top portion of it, the Hex logo is actually upside down? If you were looking at your opponent's hand, all the cards would be right side up. So Hex would actually be legible across the board. They wouldn't be upside down, because your opponent's not going to look at their hand upside down, and they're not going to be facing exactly that way. Because right now, it looks like your opponent is playing with their hand face down. Now, granted, that might be really cool for, like, tunneling, but that's not necessarily going to be what we'll legitimately see if we were actually sitting across from someone.
Yeah, and that actually, the way you're saying, like, with tunneling, too, that seems like it's going to lead people to make misplays because just if they're playing really fast, I mean, obviously, the tunneling card is going to occupy a different part of the screen, but if they're playing really fast and they see cards in the hand face down and they see other cards on the board face down, it can be confusing for people. I'm not saying it's going to be confusing for everybody or confusing for you or me, but for newer players, or just, you know, some people, if they're playing fast, that's another one that seems kind of silly. But I don't know. Like I said, if there was an option to turn off the hand being there for the opponent, I would just turn it off, because you can still see the card count on their champion thing.
Yeah, actually, I prefer the card count there a little bit more, but we've also been playing since alpha, and that makes a difference. It might be good to get a fresh perspective from some of the new players coming in Maybe
Yeah.
we might want to pose that up on the forums.
I really like. Speaking of which, I really like the new champion like faceplates.
Yeah, they are really
very
snazzy.
cool. And on top of that, I like the new wheel, like how it's a little bit cleaner and kind of has like a cartoony feel almost. Like the buttons just the buttons feel a little bit more tactile.
I agree.
I still think that they need to have somewhere on it say specifically what phase you're in. Like the wheel is there, sure, but I feel like you need to have something that says like first main phase, second main phase. So if that's something we can either turn on or get back into the game, especially in place of with a hand, because that's where it used to be for the opponent's hand, that would be wonderful, and I would appreciate it.
It's one of those things where my biggest conundrum about the setup is it is most definitely more difficult to realize exactly what phase you're in until you get used to the wheel. Like seeing where the wheel is and having that be as your graphical reminder, fantastic. I love that. But it's the transition between phases was really explicit before. And I gotta be honest, I loved it being just flat out, dumb awesome. Without a lack of a better term, it's you were told what phase you're in, you were told what phase you were going to. I was likening it before to kind of being the same as upgrading from like Windows 2000 to like Windows 7, where all the essence of everything's there. It's just a lot prettier, and it's all the little stuff that's kind of getting you.
Another thing that I liked is, especially for like streaming or just playing when you're talking to people on Skype and stuff like that, is now if you press escape during a match, it brings up the same menu it used to, but there's also a settings button. And
yeah, that's definitely
by
awesome.
pressing that, you can change the resolution and stuff while you're playing in an actual game, rather than having to leave the game and come back and do it. That's not something that comes up all that often, but it's definitely a really nice quality of life upgrade that I'm happy to see. And that's kind of what this whole patch feels like. It's a quality of life upgrade in a lot of spots. There's still a lot of improvements that I think the auction house could use, as far as kind of just speeding up the interface, having some of it automated for you, that if you list one item and it's something that you just previously listed, it would repost, or it would automatically fill in the fields. And actually, speaking of the auction house and stuff like that, I think that when you were listing stuff before, if you press tab, it would have moved it from like the minimum bid to the buyout thing. And I think you have to click now. I can't remember for certain, because I mean, obviously we only have the new UI now, but I thought tab actually worked before, and now it doesn't. So hopefully they bring that back, stuff like that. But the best part about this patch is that it's going to enable them to start cranking out more patches quicker now that we're in the Unity, the new version of Unity, because that was the big step. I can't imagine how much effort and work that they had to put in to swap it over. I would imagine that a lot of stuff needed to be recoded or completely redone. I mean, the UI looks completely different, and that's a time-consuming process. So with all that said, I think that we're going to start seeing some really fun stuff on the horizon sometime sooner, and definitely hope so.
And they put trading in.
Yeah,
that's
trading
definitely
is
you
very,
can
very
send
nice.
legit mail now.
Yeah.
So, like, going on to like the listings on the auction house. So I do like that they switched it up from the gavel to the add button. And let's do a... Yeah, you're definitely not tabbing between them. So, yeah, you're definitely not tabbing between both of them. I clicked beforehand, but that's because the setup and the way the chat's kind of overlaying has never really been conducive to tabbing across material, so I never got into the habit of actually tabbing through the interface. And they may be trying to make it a little bit more touch-friendly, and tabbing is not necessarily a touch action.
Yeah, but I mean, it can still be... Just because it's not touch-friendly doesn't mean that they can't... Or because they're trying to make it touch-friendly doesn't mean they can't also make it PC-friendly.
Agreed.
But
it's probably a matter of focus more than whether or not it'll be there. As long as we're still vocal, because you got to be vocal about what you want, or otherwise they're not going to know you want it. So, but some people may not have gone in. I also like to go into where the campaign mode is.
Yeah.
And they have given that a graphical upgrade too. So
One
they've
more
applied
thing
all the new shaders. It's cool.
One more thing I would like to see, and I'm actually kind of surprised
Mm-hmm.
that it didn't make it to this because it fits the whole theme of what they were going for.
Mm-hmm.
Although it doesn't seem like they really tried to mess around with the auction house much.
Mm-hmm.
Is the sorting for the auction house? I would like it to say like when you, because a lot of the people who've been using the auction house regularly know that if you click the minimum bid button, it'll start sorting it by different basically criteria.
Mm-hmm.
I would like it to actually display what criteria you're currently using to sort stuff. That would be nice.
Yes.
And that seems like something that would be fairly simple to implement compared to a lot of other things. But what are we... I mean, I think that sums up the patch pretty well. Unless you had anything else to talk about specifically with patch stuff that we've seen. I think we covered most of the bases except for what we're going to talk about next.
Yes, so one of the big things that occurred is they decided to implement gold bonuses to the starter trials, and they've extended the starter trials by 2 games. So for every starter that you have and for every starter that you may have purchased, every one of those trials have been extended by 2 games. And if you win the 4th game in the trial, the first new game, it's going to grant the player 2,000 gold. And if you win the 5th trial, you're going to get 5,000 gold. So this has a pretty big effect when we actually take a look at what's going on in the auction house and we start taking a look at the gold prices. Because every new player is going to get a starter, which supposedly those are soulbound now. That's what I'm hearing on the forums.
Well, they've always supposed to been soulbound. I don't know if they are now yet, but they were definitely supposed to be.
A couple of people are doing some testing to make sure that those items are soulbound. That's one of the things that I plan on checking out next time we're doing a budget stream, is to see if we can sell soulbound cards or cards from those from the original starters.
Yeah.
But one of the things, like at the moment, so after you complete your starter trials for a particular starter, you're going to end up with 5K. So just as if you'd had a tournament entry.
And you're talking 5K gold here.
5K gold, yes. 5K platinum would be really spiffy.
Yeah.
You could buy.
So you're getting 5K gold. For anybody who's new to Hex, that's kind of the PVE currency, or the currency that is not directly tied to the dollar.
Yep.
Or a real money currency.
And so you take it in, now you can essentially go into the auction house and start buying up commons and uncommons. And if you're really, really lucky, a rare, but that's going to be few and far between within the 5,000 gold range. But you can get things like Scriveners, you can get a lot of really good commons and some pretty decent uncommons. A pretty good lot for about that 5K amount. When I was buying for my budget account, the budget account, I have for 600 gold, I've easily picked up 10 to 11 cards. Just, 50 gold here, 5 gold there. Bidding and buyout depends on what kind of mood I'm in at the moment. And that just allows you to flush out those early constructed decks so that you can go into the proving grounds and just not get wiped out by missing the Veteran Gladiator or not having the Furious Taskmaster for like the Orcs, or if you wanted to complete out and make sure you had all the Volcannons in a deck for when you're using the Dwarf. That 5K allows you to at least round out your early entry-level constructed decks so that you can get in and start doing those Proving Grounds games.
Yeah, I mean, it'll let you be able to build a Rock League deck probably, or some stuff like that. The 2 things that I think are kind of funny about this is this almost feels like something that could have been put into the game before they even did the Proving Ground stuff, that when there was no trading, having some gold established on the account so that you could kind of trade yourself stuff on the auction house would have been nice. Now that we have trading, that's no longer necessary. So it feels kind of funny that something we could have had before and might have used more exists now. And then the other one, I think the part that I'm interested to hear whether you think this is even a good idea or not, especially because we were already talking about when they added gold to playing in the Proving Grounds, it definitely inflated the supply of gold, right?
It's very odd. So the reason I have to mention this is because the gold market that exists is kind of in multiple stages. So before they implemented Proving Grounds gold, gold only came from people paying for tournaments. You had to pay for a tournament to enter it. And so the gold was really just used to roll on chests. It wasn't... You would periodically get gold being used to transfer items through the auction house.
Like we were talking about.
Yeah, but you didn't have it really operating as the free-to-play currency that it was designed for. When you implemented the Proving Grounds gold, you got anyone going in and putting in the time to actually win the games necessary in Proving Grounds was getting a small amount of gold that was adding it to the overall gold economy. Now, the issue with this is that there's still an awful lot of packs out there. Even if we've run through another 500,000 packs, and let's say they were all Kickstarter packs, there still would be at least 700,000 packs unopened floating around the Hex economy. Still. And so think of it not as just the cards and the rares, but think of it as the treasure chests that are there. And every new treasure chest that comes from a draft. Well, a single treasure chest roll is not just 1,200 gold for a common chest. It can be 1,200 that turns into 3,100 that turns into 8,500 on a single chest. So you have this huge variance, and it drains huge amounts of gold out of the economy. And so
and definitely you're kind of at a point too with, like, I guess on the chest note is you could come up with an equation. I'm sure on their end, maybe Chark or somebody else already has it, of how much gold is exiting the economy on average from chests. And it's not just like there's a common, uncommon, rare, legendary chest, and this is how much each of them cost, and then this is how often they appear, and that's how much gold. But there's also, when you get a free roll, how much more gold you use by using the re-roll on it that's paid, or other things like that, or even getting gold from the chest rolling, although clearly that's you're not ever gaining more gold than you started with from the chest rolling if you're rolling a lot of chests.
Very rarely do you actually net positive gold out of it.
Yeah, and that's only even rolling commons. If you're rolling the bigger ones, that's even less so the case. But with them adding this to the starter trials, the part that I'm concerned about is that if I had unlimited accounts, like if I could just keep creating an account every couple minutes, I could definitely play through the starter trials faster than I could play games in the Proving Grounds. So I could like repeatedly do it like that. So that if all you cared about was generating as much gold as you could as quickly as possible, you can now generate it faster than you used to be able to, and in higher quantities. Which kind of makes me a little bit concerned more about like botting and stuff like that. And I know that they're really going to crack down on it if it becomes an issue. But even then, I just don't want to see them create openings for that. And I don't want to see them devalue gold at such a huge level that they need to start coming up with ways to take it out of the economy that aren't really healthy for the game. Like, coming up with a way where it's all of a sudden like gold is worth next to nothing, and so in order to take it out of the game, they come up with some consumable and it costs like 200 million gold to use or something like that, where it's so expensive that it blows everything else out of the water. Like when they really devalue gold so much, I kind of feel like stuff like that's going to become necessary. Although it is really hard to say without PvE implemented yet. We have no idea what it's going to look like. For all we know, this arena that's coming out, it might cost gold to enter or something like that, which would be interesting, and that would cause some interesting things for the economy. For the free-to-play player, where they're making gold by playing on the Proving Grounds, they would actually be able to finally sell their gold for maybe a little bit more than they currently are if gold has more value in game, because right now the only value it has is to roll chests.
Well, I disagree with the final statement there, and I'll interject a couple things here. So one thing to remember is we are in closed beta. They control exactly how much possible gold is in the market. So think of this move not as a continuum, we're going to go into open beta with it. Think of it as they are injecting this gold into the economy more as a test to see about its liquidity in the auction house.
Okay, that's what I'm hoping is the case.
So that is what it is doing now. And, that is what it's doing. Because the only time it's going to increase the amount of gold beyond the known number of starters that are in is when people buy starters, which is going to be the same thing as entering a tournament equivalent equally amount as entering a tournament. And then whenever they send out new beta invites. So they control exactly how much gold's in there. And what we're probably looking at is we're looking at either a test where they're doing a massive liquidity injection into the gold market, or what they're doing is they're checking to see, as they start letting in new players, what the effect is on the auction house from someone coming in to the PvP environment with, 5k gold essentially. Because when you're only letting in 1,000 players at a time and you're not even necessarily getting them in at your preferred rate or at your preferred timing, you can do stuff like bringing in the starter trials and allowing those additional payouts to influence what the economy's doing. I expect something to change at open beta because of the concerns that you expressed, and if we enter into this during open beta, just free starters in open beta that allow you to change if they haven't fully got the soulbound nature of a starter hashed down yet, and the inflationary side of what could occur on gold locked down either. That is a concern, but only when you hit open beta, only when you have unlimited entering. Because the only time you can create double accounts is if you happen to have double codes.
Yeah. So I mean, that I think that sums up everything there is to say about it. I think we've created a pretty good synopsis of the whole situation, both sides of the coin, kind of. And like you were saying, I really do hope that this is just temporary. I don't think it would be much of a surprise if it was, because we know the proving ground gold thing is temporary for the time being until there's other ways to generate gold. And even tournaments, even like draft and sealed and constructed tournaments that are generating gold, supposedly that's even temporary. That's not going to be a permanent
We've been
thing.
told not to get used to that.
So, in that case, I think things probably aren't looking so grim. I'm sure that they have a solution, or this is all part of the plan, kind of thing. And
I bet Chark is playing around with the data. Been like, hey, let's not tell it. Let's not put it in part of the patch notes. Let's let them find it. Let's see what happens when all of a sudden people start getting 5k for every starter that they've done. Which I gotta say was really nice, because I rolled on a couple rare chests. It was very nice.
What else was I gonna get at? All right, well, I guess we can just move on to our next topic then.
Yeah, so the... now, you were talking about the brainstorm a little bit earlier.
Mm-hmm.
You were thinking something more episodic with this one, and we were talking about it a little bit before you posted. So, where did the idea for the dungeon aspect of it come from? Did you get... was there something that's particularly sparked it?
No, not really. I mean, I guess it just feels pretty natural that eventually dungeons are going to be something that we're going to talk about. If we're just talking about different elements of the game that come to mind for me, and I have to say, who is it? Aswan Jaguar. I don't know if he's in here right now. He's usually in on our general's tent. He has been kind of helping me come up with a couple brainstorms on weeks where I'm having a rough time coming up with them. He kind of helped me out brainstorming this one exactly how I was going to present it, and you did too. And even Adam AOE too, who always contributes to the brainstorms. I think it's Brynhilder here in chat. He was helping me a little bit as well, or at least bouncing ideas off him. But we started off with doing stuff like guilds and design a card or design a mechanic. It only is natural that eventually we're going to cover all the aspects in the game, and one of those is dungeons. So designing a dungeon, getting there is probably the icing on the cake. And I'm not really sure how much more we're going to be doing these brainstorms after this takes place. It just kind of depends on whether people want me to continue them or not. But I'm really enjoying putting them together. I'm enjoying reading people's responses, and hopefully it's having at least a positive impact on the forums rather than having troll threads go around. There's fun things to talk about, not just with what I'm doing, but with what other people are doing too. It's all kind of a piece of the pie, and hopefully there's a little bit more positivity being generated from this. But with the brainstorms this week, we're talking about dungeons, and the idea is that we're going to do it a little bit more episodic, that talking about an entire dungeon in just one brainstorm, that's a lot to talk about. Dungeons have so many different aspects and things going for them, and each one is probably going to be so dramatically different than the other that there's just a lot of ground to cover. So what
True
we're
that.
starting off with at the very beginning is we're going to talk about like the setting, the theme, the environment of the dungeon, kind of that whole idea of where it's taking place, or how it's or more so where it's taking place than how it's taking place. We're talking about kind of the story elements and the flavor elements within the dungeon, and then as we move forward, we're going to kind of expound on that and see how different mechanics might fit into it. That's
That
kind of the
sounds
general
really
idea.
awesome. Have
Yeah,
you had
it's gonna be a
any
lot of fun.
really interesting submissions so far?
We've had a couple submissions so far. I think people might be a little bit more intimidated with this brainstorm, which is no surprise because, like we're saying, it is a much bigger thing to tackle. Hopefully, people will be willing to just kind of throw in some ideas anyhow, and have fun there with it. There's really no pressure to come up with the best idea. You just have to come up with something. And I'm always giving out prizes with these brainstorms. So even if you participate, even if your idea is horrible, which it probably won't be, but even if it was, you still have a chance to win. Because I always do a random kind of entry to anybody who contributes, and then I choose a couple winners. With this week, with doing the dungeons and stuff, I'm going to be choosing probably multiple winners because I expect there to be a bunch of good ones, and then within those settings that people come up with, the various ones will develop. This week, Scaminator had one that I really liked. He was the first one to submit one, and he really came up with an interesting one. It's geoglyphs, I think is the name, is the term for it. They're kind of not crop circles, but they're geographic kind of designs and signage that's made on the ground, that if you're up from a much higher space, like if you're flying over the area on a plane, you would be able to see that it's part of some elaborate piece of artwork, but if you're on the ground, you would not be able to see it. So it's similar to a crop circle in that regards.
And like
but
the
generally,
Nazca lines and all that good stuff?
yeah. And I know that they're specific to certain cultures around the world, and I want to say in Southern America, but I don't want to get too specific with that because I'm really not sure what cultures they come from. But I know they're an existing thing, and they're really cool. The ones that exist like in our world are awesome, and it would be a really cool thing to bring over to Hex. The idea here is that they all possess some kind of mythical power, or mystical power, sorry, and the dungeon revolves somehow around utilizing that, or that there's strange things going on in the environment, fun stuff like that. So, yeah. Anyhow,
Now, Hacky
but
is
yeah,
asking why he can't enter, so let's go find out why Hacky can't enter. It's probably because
No,
he doesn't
I don't
watch
think
us
he's
often
asking-
enough.
I don't think he's asking how can I enter. I think he's saying that sometimes these like shard currency things take away from the stream in a way, that they become the focus of the stream rather than what everybody's talking about. Which
Which is
I do
why
kind
I
of-
did it. I did it on the down low over here without
Yeah.
mentioning it going on yet. So
Oh.
it's just to do a quick. So for every 5 minutes that you're in the channel, you end up earning a single shard, and you can do exclamation mark, and I believe it's my shards, and I can double check that here. In any case, so after you've been in for a little bit, you can exclamation point my shards, and it will tell you what your shard value is. In any case, for when we're doing the pack giveaways, we want to make sure that the people who are staying and watching are rewarded for being on the stream. I also don't like making them the super big focus, because I like the idea of the reason people are here because they want to hang out and we're producing fun content. And giveaways should be kind of they're kind of like the extra, like the candy bowl over there on the side that you take from every once in a while sort of thing. No one ever goes, unless it's Halloween, but never's like, come over to my house for free candy while I play video games. So I didn't want to be that guy.
Yeah. I mean, there is a funny element in there. I'm sure there's probably even a term for it, but it definitely seems secondary to the nature of the stream. But in a lot of streams, it does become the focus of the stream, despite it being secondary. Anyhow, though, and now that's the realm we're starting to move into. So we were talking about the brainstorms. They're a lot of fun. We're going to be continuing it, and the idea is that next week we might not talk about dungeons. I might kind of do dungeons every other week and tie them all together when we are talking about dungeons, because I might need a little extra time to write the next post. because they're going to be somehow related. But with the next topics we're going to be talking about are like mechanics of the dungeon, maybe a final encounter. We're going to be talking about NPCs, which includes villains, bosses, mini bosses, stuff like that. And hopefully we're going to be talking about
good villains are awesome.
Yeah.
And minigames. Minigames would be awesome.
Yeah, so a lot of dungeons I would expect are going to have some sort of sub-game or mini-game. They might even not really be a mini-game in the sense where like you expect from Mario Party or something, but that would be pretty awesome if there was stuff like that. And that's actually what I was almost going to use for my dungeon theme idea, was something along those lines. But we might not see mini-games along those ends, but at least in between the matches, the actual gameplay where you're playing with cards, that there's some sort of other decision-making process going on, that you want to go this way or that way, or you want to confront the villain or work with him, or you want to retrieve the special treasure, or you want to leave it where it is, all those kind of things. That those make the dungeons more fun. They make them interesting. They separate them from each other. So that's another big one. And then also, I really like the idea coming up with NPCs for the dungeon. They talked a lot about the Kraken one on Cirrus's thing when he went to, or when Corey went out to Europe. And Corey ended up talking a lot about NPCs within the dungeon and how you keep seeing them come back between encounters, or you can interact them, you can choose to kill them or save them, and it's going to affect the way the rest of the dungeon works out, which is awesome. That's really cool. That's the kind of stuff that Hex really needs, is more than just, you get to play with one less card in your hand. Like, that doesn't make things interesting. That doesn't really add flavor to it. It might be interesting in some dungeons, but if that's really the extent of what they can come up with, that would be really lame. And luckily, they've come up with some really fun, awesome stuff. So,
all right, so here's my verbal entry for the brainstorm, since I like doing verbal entries because it saves my wrist from typing.
Okay.
So, you remember the big thing I wrote about the Shroom Nobi from before? So the setting that I would do to integrate that, since I've already thought of all that, and let's rehash other content. So why not have a setting of something like the Shin Hair growing grounds for the Shroomkin? So one of the things, because you can set up a really interesting interplay there of, you have the Ardent factions wanting to make sure that they can shut this production down, because that would hinder the capacity of the feeding capacity, as well as the movement and beast of burden capacity that would be for the Shin Hair. But then you would have the Underworld faction wanting to maintain it and probably exploit it themselves a little bit more, if you wanted to go that way. So you can just have the fungal growing grounds for all the different types of Shroomkin, because, well, if you haven't read what the Shin Hair do for the Shroomkin, it is terribly, terribly evil, but also terribly colorful as well. So I would submit that one as a setting, because then we could have the Shroomnobi working with either or the sides to try to free themselves or hinder the other, and to me that's just awesome.
Hackie's talking about the robot that's on the front page, and actually that's something worth mentioning. So there's like the front page of the HexTCG.com. They always kind of, when they do an update, they have the art in there, and on the download new patcher, like the robot in there is totally awesome. I know Hackie probably thinks he might know what that's from, and I would imagine that if I had to guess, now that Hackie's mentioning where he might think it's from, I would probably guess that I might also know where it's from, being the same thing, having visited the office, perhaps. But
so we're talking. So it's the download new patcher. That's the little robot that's got a light bulb above its head, and it's got big blue eyes and a plus and a minus sign in its eyes. And
yeah, that's really cool. I love that art. It's pretty rad. And it has a happy face drawn on it. So.
Yeah, that's really unusual. That's normally dwarves. You don't expect them to be, happy-go-lucky characters.
Yeah.
Is there something special about that robot function?
I honestly, it would just be conjecture if I thought there was. I would just be guessing at it. But either way, I think it's really awesome looking. It's cool. So,
alrighty.
Speaking of cool stuff and talking about dungeons and everything, we have the arena coming up. The Frost Arena, I think is what it's going to be called.
Yeah, that's gonna be snazzy.
Since we've gotten this patch in, I can only hope. I can cross my fingers and just wait. But I would anticipate that this is going to be coming pretty soon, now that we have an updated AI that actually I haven't really played against a whole lot yet.
It is definitely smarter.
That's good. That's good. It's not like buffing your troops or its own troops post combat and stuff like that.
Hmm.
That would be wonderful, and that goes a long way towards getting PVE in, because that was one of the criteria. This AI that we had in the game before was only ever a placeholder. It wasn't like they took that AI and kind of adapted it to what we currently have. From what I understand, they kind of completely scrapped it. It was just something, as like I said, a placeholder. So that's pretty fun to have something fun there. And I'm sure there's still room to improve and all that kind of fun stuff. But just being able to enable it is definitely nice.
Oh yeah. No, so they're getting ready for something, because one, they made the globe more stationary.
Mhm.
They've totally revamped the graphics on it. Even the Hex Comet looks even more super snazzy and a lot more menacing than it used to.
Yeah, it kind of does, huh?
It's a lot more menacing than it used to be.
Yeah, I like it though.
Yeah, definitely beautiful. And they've got weather effects, and you got clouds going over. It's really cool. Though I do think it might be about time to maybe give away some packs. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we're right about that time in the stream where we've covered most of what we're going to talk about, and now it's time to give us some stuff away to everybody who's been hanging out, participating in chat, or just tuning in and hearing what we had to say.
All right, so we're going to give away 3 packs, so that means we're going to draw 3 winners, and each one's going to get a pack. This is going to be your very last chance to. I'm going to hit the button again here, and hopefully it'll give a chance to give people the last chance to enter. I know we're just kind of hitting in since the start of it, a few more shards getting into people, and I just want to make sure that as many people can get in as possible.
Cool.
All right. 5, 4, 3, 2. All right. So we've got the entry closed. We're going to pick 3 winners.
And now we'll actually be able to send them packs. So Desk gets one. I played Desk in Rock League, I think, before, and there goes my phone. I will answer that later, though. And then who else? We got Unity Gaming and Arid. Cool.
Well, yeah, Unity attempted to enter. Arid is the second winner. And
okay.
The final winner is Man of Peas.
Right on. So,
all right.
And Quagan's asking how to get in on the drawing. Well, the drawing's already over, so
yeah,
the way you get in is tune in next Wednesday when we do the General's 10 again. So, anyhow.
Yes, so for those, what we'll do is I'm going to need y'all's in-game names. That way I can send y'all the packs, and I'll use the new fancy dancy mail system we've got, which I have confirmed works.
Yeah.
Oh yes, sorry Quaggan, we did the packs thing on the download this time, just kind of just as a little extra aside for our General's tent, especially because we didn't have like a draft pack or a mercenary or something along that big for everyone, because we like to make those a little bit more ubiquitous for everyone.
Yeah, but it's just a couple packs, so if somebody missed out on it, it's not the end of the world. But what are we going to talk about? We still have a couple things left. I think one of the bigger ones is we did we kind of unveiled our budget Hex Challenge last week, and we might as well talk about how it's gone so far. I think you and I have both played in the draft so far. I don't know if either of us has done a whole lot else than that, but you want to start off?
So I think I've picked out Saturdays to kind of be my budget draft time as a good set for there. I went into my draft, and then going through that draft and looking at it afterwards, started off with a Swiss draft, because that's just a good one to start off with, get a little bit of practice. The other thing that's really good about Swiss, and I'm just realizing this with hindsight being 2020, is it allows you to figure out where you went wrong on drafting, because you get more familiar with the stuff that you drafted with.
Yes and no. I do disagree with that a little bit.
Well, it allowed me to, because what I realized going through and drafting and playing the additional rounds that were there, or the additional round, was that the dysfunction that I drafted into allowed me to spot more clearly where I went wrong when going back to look at my draft footage. So I'm like, oh, this is stupid. Why was I doing this? I should have been focusing on this over here. And that's Part of it is
That's
coming from a primarily having rare drafted beforehand and just kind
mhm.
of picking the best things there afterwards when all the rares essentially been pulled out of whatever that pack pool was at the time. When instead of being focused and building a deck while the draft is going on, and that's a skill that I'm just going to have to learn.
Yeah. So I do disagree a little bit, but I
Mm-hmm.
also agree with what you were saying on that you do get to play all 3 rounds, so you get to see what didn't work and what did work about that deck. That's totally true. The
Mm-hmm.
part I disagree on is that Swiss, um, well, it it does seem like the caliber of player that plays Swiss is generally, on average, lower than the one that plays competitive. Um, that could just be my observations. It could be true, but I think that's designed to be the case. Is that Swiss, the way the prize payout is structured, is it's developed for kind of a more casual person who just wants to play 3 games. Because that is the case, the drafting process itself, um, when you're actually picking the cards, you're getting your 45 card pool built. Weird stuff happens in Swiss. Cards that shouldn't make it all the way around do more often than they do in competitive. It still happens that in competitive, yeah, you might see an inner conflict make it all the way back around to 9th pick. That
Mm-hmm.
does happen. But in Swiss, it seems to happen much more often. And because of that, there's a little bit more luck involved in winning Swiss. That if you're sitting in the right seat
Mm-hmm.
where the people next to you don't really know what they're passing and aren't really aware that they're basically building you a very good deck.
Mm-hmm.
That there is a luck element to where you're seated in Swiss, that you could be more favored through no fault of your own. And there's always some element of luck in draft. You might open some amazing cards, or you might not. That's always going to be the case. But I'm just saying it's a little bit more prevalent in Swiss style draft. The other part that we kind of talked a lot about this in the past, and we kind of bring it up almost every week, is it better to play Swiss or competitive?
Mm-hmm.
And the ultimate answer comes down to how good do you think you are, and what is your goal. If
Sure.
your goal is to be play at a competitive level and be proficient at the game and become better, I
Mm-hmm.
would say even if you don't currently think you're very good, you should only play competitive. That eventually it's going to help you become better quicker. If your goal is to just play casually and hopefully kind of subsidize or reduce the cost of each consecutive draft based on your own skill level, which
Mm-hmm.
you believe to be lower, then yeah, you should play Swiss. But I would say if your goal is to become more competitive, you should probably play competitive. If your goal is to, if you think you're personally not very proficient at the game, then yeah, you should play Swiss. You're more likely to get paid out
Mm-hmm.
at least a couple packs that way. The other one I would say is if you're looking at from the budget element, that in competitive, there's somebody who's going to get 5 packs and there's somebody who's going to get 3 packs.
Mm-hmm.
The very best situation you can come into in Swiss is there's only one person that's going to get 3 packs, and that's the person who does the best. So in that situation, there's one person who gets 3, and there's one person who gets 3 in both of the draft types. In the competitive, there's also somebody who gets 5. But because you're getting 3, you're still going to owe 100 platinum if you just go right into the next draft. Hopefully,
Mm-hmm.
you've pulled some cards that are worth something, and you can, cut that 100 plat even lower. But really, at that point, another dollar to enter a draft is no big deal. If you're trying to go infinite, though, the only real way to pull that off over time is by playing competitive and regularly taking either first or second, I would say.
Most definitely on that part. The one thing Swiss does allow you to do a little bit more than competitive early on is it allows you to practice picking the best from unusual situations.
Yeah.
So
That's
because
very
of the luck side of it, sometimes you just need practice picking the best thing from there. And a periodic casual draft is good for like resetting yourself for
Yeah.
picking different things. And so I think when you are not necessarily attempting to live the dream, but you're trying to keep yourself, I would say, grounded in your drafting and grounded on what values are. So like if you're on that cusp between hardcore and pro. I think it's
Mhm.
good to do a Swiss every once in a while so that you can keep that experience, because you never know.
Sure.
Maybe when HexCon comes around, there's going to be a giant Swiss draft, and you don't have an option. Everyone's going to be drafting competitively in that sucker. But you're still
Yeah.
going to get
So
used to the play time, because
yeah,
and that
because
comes to like a stamina side and different arguments for that. It's just good to always be
that's
grounded
very
in the
true.
round times.
And then even then, if we're talking Swiss, like the way the pairings are organized, that Swiss versus single elimination, neither of those in and of themselves make a draft more or less competitive. I would actually say to some extent it makes Swiss more competitive, because the person who gets knocked out round one, they're still competing the rest of the draft to see if they can get third or fourth. So in a large event, the way the pairings are done, whether it's Swiss or single elimination, don't affect who takes the 45 cards. It's just the way the prize payout is structured, what types of players those attract.
Yep.
That's really the only difference. Neither of them. I do see some people go, oh well, Swiss is easier just as a
It's
as a
easier
pairing.
because the picks are weirder.
Yeah, it doesn't say anything in and of itself.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Now, since we've been talking about first picks and all of those, you ready to crack a pack?
yeah, actually, there was one more thing I was going to touch on for draft, since we're
All
kind
right.
of on the note.
Well, I will open the pack, and while you are expounding on that, we'll let it load.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's perfect. Is for draft, because you mentioned weird cards and weird scenarios, is you shouldn't be, if you're somebody who you think is going to draft a lot, like especially early on in a format, if you think you're still going to probably play another 50 or 60 drafts, don't be afraid to make a weird choice early on in your drafting of that format. A weird first pick, maybe you're taking a rare you've never played with before. Don't be afraid to make those decisions, because you're going to learn whether or not that was a good choice. And then once you get more and more competitive, you're going to be like, oh, no, you can never first pick this rare. It's just not very good. It doesn't work well, or it's hard to pull off. Or because it's hard to pull off, you know what pieces you need in order to do so, and you know whether or not that's a realistic choice for you to make once it comes around. Fourth pick, if that rare is a build around, and you already have some of the pieces, you're going to be in good shape.
Which I think kind of sets us up for an interesting discussion about the rare in the pack that we've got. Do you have it loaded on there?
Yeah, let me enlarge the screen a little bit on my end, because mine's a little tiny. But yeah, you got an interesting pack here.
Yeah, so rare-wise, it looks like we're starting off with the Bird of Plenty. For those who may not be familiar with it, it's a 6 for 0/1 flight. But any damage that's dealt to this troop, you draw that many cards instead. So one of the best parts about this card is that it blocks very well, and it gives you card advantage for when someone decides that they want to be aggressive in the air or on the ground to you. The other side of it is it's very difficult to remove, because you must either reduce its health, not damage it, but reduce its health, or you must directly remove it through either voiding or a direct discard like a murder. So wrapping up card advantage is the reason why it costs 6, but it's single threshold, so it's a lot easier to splash at that 6 count too.
It's a very strong defensive card, and then for constructed, it is an incredibly strong combo card. Although being 6 cost kind of limits its ability in constructed. If it was cheaper, it would be incredibly more powerful. But it's still fun to build around that in constructed. I have a couple decks where they kind of combo off a Bird of Plenty, and you play every card in your deck or some silly stuff like that.
Whoosh!
What was that?
Whoosh! I play everything!
I wasn't sure if you sneezed or if you were making a noise. I was about to say Gesundheit, but
should I jazz hands next time?
What other cards? So the rare might be a consideration. What other cards would you be considering in here?
Alright, so taking a look, the first thing that always jumps out at me are blood cards, because I'm still a fan of the blood shard. I see Blood Aura here, and I am a big fan of Blood Aura. It's a powerful card. Depending on the pack, it can hit a first pick state. Depends on the pack, though. We have fun cards like Furious Taskmaster, can be really good at enabling orc-style decks. It's also a good 2 for 2/2 bear. I'm a big fan of Mystic of the Tranquil Dream, though, because that socketable aspect of it really makes it a flexible card. But then you also have good early staples like Phoenix Guard Scout, but Scout may wheel around for you as well.
Yeah,
and then you've
Scout,
got stuff
Scout's
like
a little
Ruby
easier to
Lance.
pick up past the first pick, and there's other cards that are clearly better than it in here. So
I don't see anything particularly bomby in the commons and uncommons. In this case, I'd probably go ahead and grab the Bird of Plenty, because I would, even if I don't end up Sapphire, I don't want to have to think about needing the utility to deal with it, 1, and I can splash it 2.
Okay.
Actually, really, I can splash it 1, so I can keep Sapphire open, and I take the most powerful Sapphire card, I think, here. And because, I don't see anything particularly balmy. The Ruby Lance is not the best removal because it forces you to be very heavily Ruby. And, then you just go for, at least the Bird's got evasion if you pump it.
Yeah, so in the case of Bird, where I would say you should definitely try to move away from the sentiment of, I'm going to take this because I don't really want to have to deal with it. Bird is actually a pretty easy card to deal with because Zared Venom Scorn on its own pretty much shuts down Bird. If you think your opponent has it, you can obviously just wait another turn or 2 and use it on the Bird. Another thing with the Bird is, since it costs 6, it's pretty hard to pull off, and by the time you do, in limited at least, by the time you get to the point that you can play this, somebody's probably already won the game. That's not always the case. Sometimes the games do go past like turn 9 where it could still go either way, but by the time you're able to play Bird, somebody's probably already greatly favored to win the game. This might help you come back. The card advantage it offers is pretty significant, but that's definitely a factor to consider. And Bird might still be the pick. I'm just kind of pointing out that there's some give and take with it. I would say the pick probably comes down to Bird, Mystic, or Kabbalist. If you're or Blood Aura. Blood Aura is also very good. And I think there's even an argument to be made for Ruby Lance, that there's so many Ruby cards in here that are playable that you could take Ruby Lance and you're probably guaranteed to wheel at least 2 of the Ruby cards based on what's already in there. So there's about 5 cards that you can consider playing. If you're going to take the Mystic, I would say, well, why didn't you just take the Bird? It's probably on par along the same lines of it. It's probably better. It has more upside it does have a downside compared to the Mystic, but it's not a huge one. And then Kabbalist is pretty real. If you can build the right deck for Kabbalist, it's pretty easy for you to swing in for 6 damage on turn 4, or even 5 damage, which is a lot of damage. That's pretty hard to come back from once you've taken that much damage that early in the game. It really puts you on the defensive. He kind of needs to be dealt with, and he forces your opponent to play in kind of a funny way in some games.
True. He definitely, the Kabbalist forces action. Every time I've tried experimenting with a Kabbalist, I can't pronounce Kabbalist today. When I've tried experimenting with the past, he's fallen very easily to removal. But that's going to be the case with almost every troop. It's the same kind of case that you'd make for Rose Lion, I think, in this case. It's just, instead of gaining 1 each turn, he's a little bit more aggressive than the Rose Lion.
Yeah, no, he's much more aggressive. He falls off in the late game, whereas Rose Lion that's where it starts to shine. And also in the Kabbalist's case, is it kind of opens yourself up to a couple more combat tricks with cards like maybe Atrophy, that not only do they reduce him, but they reduce the opponent's hand size and kind of do stuff like that. But when you're concerned about, well, this guy dies to removal, you're kind of saying that he's a bomb if you're saying that he draws out removal that often. And I'm not saying he's really a bomb, but when you start crossing that line is when, if you have a lot of cards in your deck where it's like, well, this card is going to definitely get murdered because it's really good. Well, all of a sudden you're saying that you have a deck full of really good cards, and that's not a bad thing by any means.
True, that's not a bad place to be. I think I've appreciated the flexibility of the Mystic more than I have the upfronted side of the Fiendish Kabbalist. And the big difference between those two is making sure you have the 2 Ruby threshold for the Kabbalist early. Yeah,
and the Mystic's very good. Like, it can go in, it fits really well into like the Sapphire Wild Boulder Brute decks, and it fits really well into the Sapphire Diamond decks where you're playing a Noble Citizenry and turning the Mystic into a 4/6. The only catch with that is they're both 4-drops, so that's kind of awkward, but that's not really that big of a deal. The Mystic just fits well in a lot of decks, whereas the Kabbalist is not flexible in quite the same way. That's definitely something also to be concerned about. Another thing I would say with draft, and something a lot of players should really focus on, because it's actually a pretty big deal, especially or with set 1 of Hex, is that there are a lot of different archetypes that you can build.
Yes.
And some cards fit into those archetypes much better than other ones do. An example is that there's a Lionel Flynn deck that is really strong if built right. And the idea is that you're playing Ruby or Ruby Blood most of the time. Sometimes you play a different color combination, but those are the 2 most common ones. And the idea is that you're just playing a bunch of guys that are unblockable or very hard to block. So you're playing like the Effigy with the Ruby Gem, or Gem Crazed Berserkers, or Hellhounds, or Wailing Banshees, stuff like that. Maybe even a Phoenix Card Scout where it's an early drop with Flight that you can buff later on and it'll become kind of a threat. But the idea is that you're playing a bunch of evasive guys and you're just putting Lionel Flynn's ability on there. That deck is really vulnerable to removal, more so than most others. But the idea there is that there's some cards that just don't work well in that deck. And when you start drafting, and if you're planning on playing that deck, you need to be really careful to pick cards that are actually going to fit well for your archetype. That's more important for competitive, less so for Swiss when you get more opportunities to, get your pack. But it's just something to keep in mind. There are definitely a lot of archetypes in set 1. I would say there's probably at least 20 different archetypes that I could pick, and maybe that's because I get really narrow with the different types of decks. Like, there's not just a robots deck, there's different types of robots decks, and some of them want Scrap Welder, some of them Scrap Welder's completely useless and a bad card to have in the deck. So that's just me kind of maybe nitpicking on the draft strategy a little bit, but their draft is pretty deep. It's really well designed, and they did a good job on it.
And this just first set, just wait till we get set 2.
Yeah, which hopefully isn't too far away.
Let's see if we got and we got a chest we can roll on too.
Yeah.
All right, so I have this theory, and it's confirmed but not confirmed. With we went around on Twitter about this sucker, and after the VIP tournament, I decided I want to go spend some of my gold, and I'm going to go roll a couple uncommon chests.
Sure.
And when I rolled those uncommon chests, I got fantastically lucky, and from there I ended up getting 5k gold, and I ended up getting one of the PvE rare items. It's called a bubble mail, and we have no idea what the bubble mail does yet. We just know that it's rare, and it sells for stuff on the auction house presently. It's only available through the Wheel of Fate right now, or the Well of Fate right now. And I'm like, oh wow, I've got a bubble mail, and it gave me 5k gold just right after rolling. And I'm like, okay, let's roll again. Roll the second time, I end up getting the Windborn Acolyte Mercenary. Second roll right after that. I'm like, this is really weird, because just like our previous roll that we were on, I have been getting nothing, and I did a few more rolls earlier. I ran through 5 different chests today, not even a gold drop or a reroll on any of them today. And that could be like, oh, well, anecdotally, maybe you're just getting lucky. But when I start piecing it all together, I'm like, every time that I'm rolling right after an organized event, either right after the draft wind comes or right after a long tournament, I notice that the payout seems to be significantly better and a lot more consistent, and sometimes you'll link payouts. I had a really great one a couple months ago where I literally rolled 3 times in a row alternate art Wrathwood, alternate art Wrathwood, alternate art Wrathwood within 3 chests.
And then we had mine last week where I rolled the same chest 8 times and didn't get anything out of it. It just kept giving me a reroll on it, so that was kind of wacky.
Well, and let me ask you, did you do that just after a tournament?
I don't think I did. I can't really remember. The only time I've gotten a Wrathwood, though, I won a draft using a Wrathwood, so that's kind of funny.
Did you roll shortly thereafter the draft?
Yeah, I think I rolled right away, maybe.
So what I'm thinking... So what I'm thinking, and I put this out on Twitter, is I think that there is a buff that occurs after you participate in an organized event and after your prize goes out. I think it only lasts a certain amount of time. Okay. I think you have to be logged in, and I think if you log out, you lose it.
You lose the
buff. And it goes away.
Well,
I hate to overtalk, but it's so I put this on Twitter, and then Corey responds to that. Just kind of like
a cryptic answer.
Yeah, just kind of like maybe.
Yeah. So I mean, it's definitely possible. It could be. It could be real. It could also just be superstition. But either way, it's definitely fun to, even if it's just superstition and there's no actual factual basis in it. It's still fun to think about, and it's still fun to consider yourself getting a buff and seeing if it pays off every time you win a tournament. It's a fun little psychological reward for winning the tournament. That's for sure.
Well, I am paying attention now, and if Corey's in the stream, I am watching for this, and I'm going to start writing data. I'm going to participate in the beta thread, and if it happens again, it's going to be data time, because it's really hard to prove it, because you have to make sure your selection sizes are very accurate.
And so it's hard to build that selection pool too, because you have to win a draft, and
Yes, so first you have to win a draft, and you have to have enough people win a draft, and you have to consider what is the payouts that can occur. But every good thing that I've gotten, I would say, has occurred after a draft. And when I start paying attention to the people who are trying to complete out and dropping, making sure that they have all the available PvE items that are currently out there, they tend to be tournament participants. So, anecdotal? Maybe. Possible? I think so.
Yeah. And actually, now I'm realizing we never talked about my part of the budget challenge.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because you had a... Yeah.
I did pretty well for myself. I opened pretty well, so I got a little lucky. I had an incredibly intense game against Colin in round 2, and I won't spoil too much more about how that went for me, because you can go watch it on YouTube. I posted the entire draft process and the gameplay up on my channel, so that's fun to watch if you haven't seen it yet. There's some really good games in there. I definitely might have mispicked a little bit during draft, and ended up having a decent deck. And I'm not sure if I feel like I mispicked on the third pick of pack 1. I think if I mispicked, that's where it was, and it might have had like a ripple effect for the rest of the draft. But I still like where I wound up. I have to go back and kind of think about that a little bit. Anyhow, that's just my little blurb about that. We have anything else to say while we're wrapping up the show?
Nope. I'm just in a quick game to prove that the server is up and going and all of that good stuff at the moment, even though these hands are terrible, and I'm going to get out of this PB or this Proving Grounds game.
So, Easy to Be Bad is asking us in Twitch a very good question, something that we should maybe make a little bit more readily apparent, is every week now. Actually, we've been on a roll, and we've been doing a really good job with it.
I know,
every week
I'm so
now,
proud.
That's pretty incredible. We do the general tent on Wednesday nights. Mokog and myself, this is Function, in case you weren't already aware. Mokog and Function do the General's Tent on Wednesday nights. We usually do it sometime starting between 5:30 and 7:30. If you stay tuned to us on Twitter, Mokog has the bot posting our Twitter info in chat. If you stay tuned in on us on Twitter and follow us, we usually send out a message before we start recording, so you can always do that. And both of us...
Yeah.
Oh.
And if you follow the Twitch channel, it'll also send a notification to you via email.
The other nice thing that's been going is now that we have this budget challenge going, you and I have both been streaming a little bit more often. I streamed last week. I was hoping to stream last night and record the second draft of my budget challenge, but the servers were down, and I was hoping to on Monday as well. Hopefully they'll come back up soon as far as the tournament servers go. We'll be able to record some drafts and do some fun streaming stuff with folks. We'll see how that goes. I don't know when I'm going to have time to. The next couple days I'm working, and then I'm going to go out to the movies on Friday. But hopefully I will have a chance. So.
Well, and you've been hearing me work on it. So when I recorded my part of the budget challenge, I had unlicensed music going on the stream, which is good for Twitch, but is terrible for YouTube. And so I find myself in this conundrum where I have my budget challenge plus my VIP footage, the VIP tournament footage, all unlicensed music, intermittent throughout the whole thing. And I'm like, oh goodness, I have to redub everything before I get it up there, or the channel's going to get flagged to high heaven. So that's the reason why my stuff is from last week is not up yet. But I'm working on that, and I'll be working on that later tonight.
Yeah. There's somebody asking in chat just about our start times and stuff. They're a little, it varies from time to time, but yeah, the budget challenge is fun. And the other thing I was going to say along those lines of kind of what you were saying is, I was almost going to record the VIP matches I played, but I didn't get my camera and everything set up in time. It started a little bit too quick because I was editing videos right before it started, and they actually I was editing videos even for like the first minute of the tournament, and I did all right. I got my promos, but what I was gonna say is I was thinking about just recording it for YouTube and not streaming it. But yeah, we're trying to do it a little bit more often, get that fun stuff going, and
We're keeping each other accountable.
Yeah. So I have to. I did all my videos for last week. I got to do something this week, or else I'm not gonna be pulling my weight on the challenge. So
well, you see, I got to do my videos for last week, and I've learned how to not make them terrible or make them hard to do for this next week. And it was so bad. There's so much good music I can't use because I don't own it. Oh.
Yeah. Well, you
bad
can always
YouTube, bad.
message the record label if you're familiar with them, and you can ask them permission.
No, it would be faster just to redub everything than it would be to wait for some of the record labels to get back.
It's you'd be surprised. I mean, I having
not all
done
small.
having done like radio podcasts and stuff, and getting permission along those lines, which you don't even need to some of the time, but I did it just out of common courtesy. Most people are pretty ecstatic to be like, oh, you want to use our music? Yeah, go ahead, and get a bunch of free stuff to give away or something. You never know.
Well, it seems like we're going to have to start tapping Function for getting new music for the channel.
Yeah, we'll see. All
right.
But without further ado, I think we are possibly done for the evening.
I do think that wraps us up for the evening. Okay. Everyone, thanks. I always look at the chat when I want to address everyone, and everyone's over here while the camera's over here. Everyone, thanks for watching. Thanks for stopping by and hanging out with us on this General's Tent. Be sure to follow the channel. Be sure you also click over to Function's channel where he'll be doing his stream, as well as different things related to the budget challenge. Check out both of our YouTube channels, YouTube /Funktionfails for Function, HexHunter Mokog for ours, for mine. We have other great streamers down in the bottom who may be up or not up necessarily, but they're all a great bunch of guys who do a lot of good stuff. And especially if you're new and you want to start getting a couple little goodies here and there, they do giveaways as well. And I think that's it.
Yeah, that's just about it. We're all done for the evening. And
Sweet.
People were talking about here in music. I mean, it's completely unrelated to General's Tent. But when you say smaller artists, you'd be surprised. Even a lot of, like, at least maybe not pop music, but basically any bigger non-pop artists are pretty all about letting you play their stuff. In my personal experience, whether they're rappers or whether they're big punk rock stars. So, but yeah. Anyhow, that's not related to General's Tent. So, yeah.
Sweet. Everyone have a fantastic and wonderful evening, and be sure you click on and check some of our other Twitch streamers out. Adios.
Adios. Have a nice night, guys.